Hi guys, how's everyone going? I hope you're going to behave yourself this week, Bernie. Hi Gavin, I was thinking about you just before. I've got this book here. It could be yours, but isn't possession 9/10 of the law? I will give it back. Hi Julie, Dan, Auntie Janet. What we'll do, as usual, we're going to let everyone filter in. Tristan's going to be joining soon. Hi, Mum and Dad. Hi, Julie. Hope everyone's got their beers to hand. I've already started. This week's a little bit different. I've been really excited. I won't just be talking to myself in the phone. I'll have Tristan with me as well. Hi, Kaylee. So inside this week, we've got sunshine. It was warm this afternoon, but it's pretty windy. So I thought it would be a little bit more relaxed and comfortable inside again. Hi, Sven, webmaster Sven, also part-time brewer with us. Sven was with me and Dan when we made our first 5-litre batch of IPA. Hi, Joan and Aidan, and I guess Michael's with you. Hey, Si and Sophs. What beer have you got there, Simon? Hey, Sven. Little technical glitch there, I think. I have no beer here, only rum. It's allowed. Okay, so a couple of Guernsey ones there, Si. I'm just... here we go. Right, Tristan should appear in a minute. Connecting. It's looking promising. Hey, Tristan.
How you doing?
We've got you.
Good, good. Yeah.
How's it going? Sorry?
I think I must have made a mistake.
I can't really hear you too well.
Take the headphones out. Is that better?
Ah, there we go. That's better.
There we go. There we go. I think these headphones are broken.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Yeah, all good, thanks. We're just waiting for some people to filter in at this end.
Yeah, no problem.
So you got a beer to hand there?
Yeah, I've got. Hang on, let me see. It's just one of mine that I bottled up this week.
Okay.
Just not filtered or anything. Just out of the fermenter, straight into a bottle.
Good stuff. Pretty much like this one we've got here.
Exactly.
One of the ones that we've brewed. It didn't quite go to plan. We'll maybe chat about it later. but it's drinkable, which is the main thing.
That's all that matters, really, isn't it?
At the end of the day, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've tasted worse, that's for sure.
Well, there you go then. You're winning half the battle then.
Yeah. So we'll give it a couple more minutes. There's a few more people just coming on online, and we'll take it from there. I mean, it's great to have you with us because normally I think this is the 5th or the 6th one that I've done on a Saturday. I missed last Saturday, but it's normally me just talking to myself. So it's nice to have somebody joining me.
Like doing the radio, but without being able to see your voice, see yourself then.
Yeah,
It's strange sitting in a room talking to people who aren't there.
Yeah, no, exactly. Wondering whether they can hear me and if they're laughing at my jokes or it's just me laughing.
Well, as long as you're laughing, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah. And the great thing about this week is that I've also already cracked a beer open, which isn't normally I have to wait for the tasting part. So it's a little.
I see. Yeah, but at least you've got there's no reason to wait this week, is there?
No. Dan, can you see the comments coming up there, Tristan, as well?
I can, yeah.
Okay, that's Dan, who I work with. Ollie talks to himself a lot anyways. which is
I think if you don't, I think if you don't talk to yourself, there's something wrong.
yeah.
I think it's hardwired into us, isn't it, to talk to ourselves?
I think so. Yeah, it helps.
Yeah.
Cheers, Marcus. So yeah, maybe we get it underway.
Up to you. I'm not too bothered. I'm not too fussed. Up to you, really.
Good stuff. I'll just do a little welcome, and then I'll maybe talk a little bit just about Lanzarote beers to give you a very, very quick overview, and then hand over to you, and then you can tell us a little bit as one of the brewers here. Just put a message. Cheers, Gav. An overview of the Lanzarote market, and then you can tell us what you've been up to. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us. Hope you're all safe and well, and following all the advice and all that sort of stuff. First apology is very sorry for last Saturday. I did try and put something together, but I just sort of ran out of time in the end trying to find a good idea. But we're going to make up for it this week with something completely different, and just a general chat on beers, really. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens in Lanzarote, also what Tristan's up to in Pocklington in Yorkshire as well. And I've got a couple of questions for him, and then we'll just open it up for anybody to ask away, really, and hopefully one of us will be able to answer. So, as always, if you're there having a beer with friends, send us a picture, give us a tag. It's always cool to get those at the end. And also a thanks, because we didn't do one last Saturday. I did actually have a couple of messages asking if I was okay. So yeah, thanks for them. Everything's fine. So brewing in Lanzarote. We have been running craft beer tours here for coming up to 2 years. It came just after the Wine Tours, and we do have 3 craft breweries here now. The first one kicked off in 2014, a brewery called Los Aljibes de Tahiche, and 2 others set up in 2016. And I would say between the 3 of them, they're producing something like 120 to 150,000 litres a year. And the great thing is the 3 of them have all got different sort of business models, different styles, and a different ethos. So there's lots of variation, which is great.
And is all that beer being sold just on the island, or is it
from brewery to brewery? One of them in particular is just on the island. There's a second one that is really quite commercial now. They got distribution across all the Canaries. They've even got a bit of distribution on the Spanish mainland now as well. Very small in Madrid. Yeah. It's certainly the direction they're going. The one that's just producing on the island is certainly looking to do more commercial type stuff on the island, and who knows where that leads them into the future with moving to new premises and things like that. And the third one as well, they set up a brew pub here, and it's in the countryside, but it's busy most days when it's open in the evenings. So there is a good tailwind behind the industry. There's lots of interest, and on the tours we get a lot of people with great knowledge of beer. It's really taken us by surprise. About half the people that join us are either craft like home brewers. We get brewery owners, and they know a lot of detail. Camera members, for instance, and they have been impressed by the beers of the island. Which is
the majority of people who go on your tours, are they like on holiday in Lanzarote, or do they live in Lanzarote?
The vast majority is on holiday. I would say, north of 95%.
So you're getting a good range, then. Good range of people turning up.
No, absolutely. And, we've got people from all around the UK, Ireland, Europe as well. We get a lot of Dutch, Belgium, too. So it's nice to get lots of different stories from, not just the UK. But
places. Yeah.
And we get a lot, funny enough, from up around your part of the world as well. And we've already had a couple of
Yeah.
comments when we were advertising today. We know Poplington. We love the Black Swan. Pickering. The Black Swan. So yeah, it's worked out.
Well, I hope it's good anyway.
Yeah. Well, I certainly had a nice time. I mean, I've got to say a big thanks to Mark at Brewtown Tours who put us in touch again, because I visited you about 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, almost to the week, and blown away by your little brewery there, and the setting, fantastic. So
yeah, there are definitely worse places to be located to be brewing.
Yeah.
I'm sure to be honest, I'd probably have Lanzarote though over Pickering, but I don't know. I don't think I'll be able to pick the kit up and move it very easily. So I suppose Pickering will have to do.
Yeah. So what's happened in the last couple of years with you? Maybe just give us a little overview of what you're brewing and capacity and any plans.
Last couple of years have been quite busy. It's become, we seem to be, because my parents have owned the Black Swan for coming up to 5.5 years now, and I've been brewing there for about 3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5 years. And I'd say that in the last 2 years, probably since we last saw each other, it's become a lot busier for me. I've gone from, the brewery that I'm in is only a 2.5 barrel brewery, so I'm only producing 360 litres at a time. And I would say that in the last 2 years, 95% of all the beer I've made at that brewery has been sold through the Black Swan. I haven't had any extra capacity to sell to many other places. I've managed to get some beer into a couple of beer festivals here and there, but I think something like 70% of all the beer that was sold in the Black Swan in the last 18 months was brewed on site. So it's been very, very busy for me. And I've only, because of size, because the building, for people who don't know, the brewery itself is in probably a 5 metres squared, so 5 by 5 metres squared, little 25 metres squared room. So there's not a lot of space. I've only got space for 3 fermenters. One of those fermenters is completely dedicated to lager, and for anyone out there who does homebrew knows that lager takes a lot longer to brew than your standard ale. So, the last 18 months, 2 years have been basically me producing the same 4 or 5 beers week in, week out to try and keep up with demand for the pub. Because Pickering itself is a tourist town, the majority of sales happen between, let's say, March and November. And in that time, I was always, and I still, well, until this year, obviously, I've always just been either just on top or just behind on production. So we'd actually, maybe middle of last year, had started plans to expand. And we'd found there was a brewery in Kirby Moorside, which is just quite local to here, which housed Turning Point Brewery, who have now moved to Knaresborough. So Turning Point were moving out. The unit was coming up for, it was open for a potential new owner or new occupier, and we were going to move in there. We still are going to move in there. We have moved in there, but because of Corona and everything COVID-19 related, that sort of has gone on hold for the time being, because it would be very difficult to try and, with the brewery that we're moving and expanding into is a 12-barrel kit, so it's pretty much 5 times the capacity, just under.
Yeah. And
to go from making 360 litres brew length to 1,200 more, maybe 1,800 at a time, but at the moment with very limited ability to sell it unless you're bottling it, we've decided to hold off for not the foreseeable, but until the climate sort of steadies out a bit and we know more which way we can go with the brewing. So at the moment, all I'm doing is just keeping the local population of Pickering happy, bottling beer up every week by hand, which is taking up all my time. And it's like going. I feel like I'm going back to homebrew days where you sit for hours in the garage cleaning out bottles by hand and sterilising bottles by hand and then filling bottles by hand. And then I
A lot,
have
a lot,
forgotten how much work it is.
a lot of love, patience, and swearing goes into
Oh,
it.
definitely. There's definitely a lot of patience involved. Yeah, definitely.
So, and then when you move, you're going to look to sort of commercialize it more. Are you
Yeah,
get beer
that's
with
the hope.
different pubs
The
and
plan.
for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the plan. We're hoping to expand into other pubs around the area. I mean, Rydale, where Pickering's located, has got 700 odd pubs, I think, and bars. So there's definitely the demand, or there's definitely the customers out there. Especially around this area, traditional ales are still very popular. So the core range of beers I make are very, very much straight down the middle, nothing too crazy, very drinkable, very old, not old school, but no crazy hops, nothing too out there, and they go down very well. And I think that the beers that I make will definitely be well suited to plenty of other pubs and places around here. And hopefully, fingers crossed, once we get out of this, situation with everything, with lockdown, what have you, we'll be able to get going running, really, because the brewery's all set up and ready to go. So we're really just waiting now to see exactly when we think it's the right time to start, because there's no point making 5,000 litres of beer now and then sitting on it trying to sell it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess the good thing is now, with the way the market is, there's always lots of pressure on the bars to have something new and have something different in. So for somebody that sort of, I guess, proved themselves and already making good beer, this well thought should be opportunity there.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I'd hope so. We're hoping to bottle as well. So, it's always a thing. Since we've had this pub, you have brewers coming in or people trying to sell you beer, but they don't actually. All they're doing is bringing you some marketing material, some leaflets, what have you, and that really doesn't give you an idea of how the beer is or whether it'll go down well. And you have to sort of commit to buying a couple of casks from them and hope that the people who drink in your pub like it. Yeah. What I'm hoping to do is be able to have bottles already done, so that when I can take my marketing material to other customers, I'll be able to also give them a bottle of beer and say, crack that open, see what you think. And then there's a bit more, security in your purchase then, isn't there?
No, sure. There's a bit of substance backing it up. So
yeah, exactly.
You're brewing, are they kegs or cask?
So I make a mixture of keg and cask. I do, because obviously we own a pub. I mean, cask beer is still king, really, in pubs.
Yeah.
So I do probably about 60-40 cask keg. Right. The lager I make obviously goes into keg because you need to, but then all the ales and everything I make, I do put mainly into cask. I hope that when I move into the newer brewery, I'm going to try and split whatever I make into whatever goes into cask also go into keg. So there's a bit of so you can either have it in cask or keg, depending on where the beer's going. If beer's going further afield and it might take a bit longer to sell, then it can go in keg, because keg naturally lasts quite a lot longer than cask.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I mean, for those that are familiar with the local craft beers on the island, everything here is in kegs. Obviously, particularly in the UK, there's a lot of real ale in cask. The difference, you've got sort of slightly warmer beer. It's not carbonated in the same way. What other differences are there from a brewer's perspective in terms of making it and managing it?
Well, I'd say the difference between cask and keg. So cask beer, what you do is when your beer's finished fermenting, instead of you forcing carbonation or conditioning to your beer, you're letting the yeast do that conditioning for you back in the cask. So you fill your beer into the cask, you chill your beer down first, then transfer your beer into a cask, then seal your cask up, move your cask into somewhere that's maybe 12 to 14 degrees. And in that temperature, the yeast that you've transferred through with the beer has got time to heat up again. And what it'll do is it'll start fermenting the little bit of sugar that's left in the beer from what you've transferred. And because obviously the CO2 that's the byproduct of that fermentation has got nowhere to go because it's in a sealed container, it dissolves into the beer. So then you get just a slight condition on the beer. But the problem with that is that you haven't got any control over that condition, because the only control you've got is watching the fermentation. If you, let's say you finish fermentation a day too early and there's still quite a lot of fermentable sugar in the beer, when you transfer that to cask and you bung it up, put it in the cellar and it warms up again, there's suddenly double the amount of sugar that you want to be fermented out. And then when you tap it, it just explodes and there's foam everywhere, and it might rouse the beer up and make it cloudy. So you've got to be quite careful on your fermentation, and whether you don't want to under ferment and then transfer to cask, because as soon as it's in the cask, any control over the condition is gone. Whereas with keg, what you can do is you can ferment a beer all the way down to final gravity, and then you can then put carbon dioxide back into the beer, put some top pressure on your fermenter or into your conditioning tanks or however you do it. And then, depending on temperature of beer and the pressure at which the CO2 has been, you've got your top pressure at, you can look at your table of carbonation and you can choose, I want, let's say, 1.5 units of carbonation in this beer. So therefore, at 5 degrees, I need it at whatever PSI. And you can control that. And then when you transfer that to keg, you know that the keg's got exactly what you wanted it to be condition-wise in there. Yeah. And then keg, you can... The problem as well with cask is that because cask it's basically a container with a top bung and a bung on the side, most pubs, probably not nowadays, but they used to have the cask lay on the side, and you put a tap in the bottom, and then on the top, which you put a bung, like a breathing peg in, and then you're basically letting atmosphere, you're using gravity. They're all gravity-fed systems. So when you pull a pint of beer, it sucks a pint of, it basically replaces what was in the cask with air and oxygen. And so then a cask, so that's why the old theory of you can tell when a beer is starting to go off in a pub is, it's a few days old, is because it's been tapped and then it's obviously maybe had half of it drawn over the 3 days. The oxygen has started to react with the beer. And we all, people who do brew know that oxygen and beer don't go well together when it's finished fermenting.
Yeah.
And that's when the beer starts to go off. Whereas with a keg, obviously it's completely sealed. You're never getting anything in there other than CO2. So keg beer will last for weeks, if not months, once you've put it on service. What a lot of pubs do nowadays is, to get around this, is they will put something called an aspiration system in. So instead of, they'll tap a cask the same way, but instead of letting oxygen into the beer, into the cask, when you pull a pint, they have a system set up with generally mixed gas of 60-40 CO2 nitrogen. And then that creates so when you pull a pint, it replaces that pint of beer with a pint or the similar volume of gas. And then that gas sits, but it's because it's atmosphere, you're not actually going to affect the condition of the beer at all. Yeah. So you keep, because I think, is atmosphere 12 psi? So you keep your aspiration at 12 psi. So when the gas goes into the cask, there's no chance of it actually dissolving into the beer. So all that gas does is just create a layer over the beer to protect it, and that can change a cask beer's life from maybe 4 to 5 days to 3 to 4 weeks. Okay, so you that's how most pubs do it now. That's how we did it at the Black Swan, and then I just happened to go into another pub cellar in Doncaster, of all places, when I was delivering some beer there, and they were part of a pub co, or like a chain pub, and it might have been Carlsberg or someone. And their setup in the cellar was incredible, but they also do the same thing. There's a lot of places in England, and a lot of camera members really don't like the idea of aspirating the beer. But for many pubs, especially pubs out in the sticks or where they're not going to be able to guarantee, because a cask is 72 pints. If you've got 6 beers on tap, and you've got 72 times 6, 420 pints of beer to try and shift in 5 days. That's a lot to do if you're a small country pub in a village with maybe 25 regulars. So you've got to aspirate your beer to keep on top of the casks. Yeah. So you're not just throwing away spoiled beer all the time.
Yeah. There might be that sort of demand after all of this is over. I'd imagine there's going to be a big rush to the pubs.
Possibly. I can imagine.
When we're all allowed out.
Yeah, well, maybe, but I mean, I mean, at the moment, it seems like the main demand now has become bottling or mini kegs or things like that. So I don't know whether that's going to shift the way that people drink real ale, because now the only way to drink real ale is to get it in bottles,
Yeah.
and bottled real ale is nowhere near the same as having something from a cask, because it's really very difficult to imitate cask conditioned beer in a bottle, because
that's part of the
the
process.
way the bottling, the way the bottling process works is that if you were to do it, it just doesn't work in bottles. It needs to be fizzier generally, if you want it to last longer, because I mean, we might see a shift in the way that people are, taking what they were drinking from a hand pump. They might start reacting better to it in a bottle after all this.
Yeah,
Time
will tell.
I don't know. Time will tell, definitely.
Time will tell. So one thing that we've is quite interesting on the island here is that we've got no lakes, no rivers, no streams. Yeah. So we've got no drinking water. Well, we do have drinking water, that we are, of course.
Do you do mainly bottled water?
Yeah, mainly bottled water. But the way that the island has survived going back centuries was basically collecting rainfall through, and that rainfall would be collected in something called an aljibe. The first brewery on the island, Los Aljibes de Tahiti, is named after that. The brewery now is actually inside one of the aljibes for the village. It's massive. It's probably the size of a tennis court in there in terms of square meterage, with these lovely arches. And that's where they brew the beer. But I mean, even in the countryside now, there's aljibes all around the island, because when it rained, that's where the water was collected from, the hard landscaping above. The way that we all survive on the island now is because we've got a desalination plant, which takes the salt out of the seawater. So all of our water here brewing comes from the sea, which of course isn't typical in brewing.
No, it's not, no.
But it doesn't mean that the beers are salty, luckily.
So is the water profile fairly neutral then?
Well, what they do
is it not many salt
by reverse osmosis, all that sort of stuff, and then work with a chemist to add back the minerality into the water to match the sort of style. I mean, for those that are listening as well, the style of water has matched the style of beer. So if you think of Ireland, you think of sort of stouts and porter because of their water minerality. You think of Germany and Czech Republic and, lagers there, mostly because of the type of water. How do you go about water in Yorkshire?
Right. Well, I'll go back a bit further first, just to pick up on the idea of reverse osmosis and what have you. So I think you'll probably know, but no one else here will know that my start into brewing was in Turkey. So my dad I helped my dad open a brewery. It was a microbrewery in Turkey. And we had exactly the same problem out there, because obviously the drinking water was no good. Tap water was a no-go. And the water, the quality of water there was horrendous. I mean, you could understand why there was a subsidy on bottled water when, you looked at the colour of the tap water, and also when you started doing analysis of it and how bad it was. So we had, when we started brewing out there, we hit the same issues with water. When Dad was brewing, because he started home brewing, he was just using bottled water, because you could buy 25 litres of bottled water, and he was just using that to brew with. But when we got on to brewing at 1,500 litres, that wasn't really an issue, an option. So we actually put in a reverse osmosis system on site. So all the water we used was basically neutralised, and then we just added the salts back.
Okay, so very interesting, very similar to here.
Pretty much the same way, yeah. So then what we would do is that, because we made a stout, we made a stout and a porter, we made a lager, we made all these different kinds of beers, and all we'd do, it was actually better that way, because you'd basically start with a blank, like a blank canvas, and then we could put exactly the salts in that we wanted to replicate certain water profiles around the world.
Sure.
so that's pretty much the same as they're doing. They'll be doing in
Twisted
Lanzarote, I
kilter.
suppose. Yeah. Whereas in Pickering, the water around here is very, very hard. Very hard. Yeah, as Rockstar Longler says, you get a lot more control. And that's a brewer's dream. The more control you can have, definitely. But around Pickering, the water's very, very hard. And it's not really ideal for brewing. It's not great. So we have a bunch of water softeners throughout the pub. I mean, the pub has got a big water filter when it comes in to try and soften it up a bit. And then I've got some filters as it comes into the brewery. So we try and soften it as much as we can. And then same thing, I just add in salts as and when I need, depending on what beer I'm making.
Okay.
So if I'm making something like the stout that I make, which is a very nice drop of beer, I must admit, the amount of chalk, I put a lot of chalk in that just to try and replicate Dublin much as I can. Because, I mean, when it comes to making a stout, it's literally the only water profile you want to be following is Dublin water, because Dublin water is just it literally complements making. Yeah, that's what we do with water. I mean, the brewery in Kirby Moorside, which I'm moving to, actually has a natural spring. It's actually got a borehole drilled, and the water there comes from a spring up from the national park, and that's much softer, and it's actually not too bad as it stands. It doesn't really need a lot doing to it, really.
Okay, perfect.
Well, to start brewing, so you never know. We might even get it just bottled up as spring water. It could be a side to the brewing.
Yes,
just bottle
to
up
the beer.
spring water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been, we're home brewing now. We've brewed 5 now, I think, and we've been using some bottled water, but the last couple of times we've used Dan's water from home. He's got a filtration system that he put together. And it's the bacteria's killed with UV light to finish off, and then it's remineralized. We haven't actually drunk one of the beers made with that water, and we're going to try and get it analysed in the next few weeks. So we'll see. But the water that we used just from the supermarket in town, the beer seems to be okay.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, that's what. I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of my dad here, because I didn't really do a lot of brewing with him when he was home brewing, because that's how he started the whole thing, was just home brewing when we were in Turkey. But I always remember he just used to use bottled water, like 25-litre bottles.
Yeah.
Because at least then you knew that it was pretty much it was as close to being sterile and in some form of drinkability straight out of the bottle. So then you could just use that and also with bottled water, they publish on the side of the bottles what salts and minerals are in it already. So from that, you've got a good idea of what you need to either add or take out.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, we keep encountering problems on the home brewing side. We get over one hurdle that we're really chuffed about, and then we encounter another, and it's an evolving process that we're absolutely loving. We're making our own kit out of whatever we can, and the last brew we did was yesterday, and we have this fight with the sugars and the waters that we use. I mean, initially, for those that don't know, when we do the home brew, we do it in a big bag, like a big tea bag, effectively, and we skipped out.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Are you doing full grain mash? Are you doing a full grain mash, or are you doing extract? You're doing full grain, okay.
We've done extract. It's always been through grain. So,
good.
So yeah, in the big tea bag, and typically we're doing 20 to 25 litre batches. We've now reduced that to 10 to try and hone in on a recipe, and it gives us a little bit more idea for experimentation and things. But we initially just started off with a load of water and in with the bag and the grain, and we skipped out the sparging process effectively.
Yeah.
And we did that twice, and we ended up with like lower sugar than we needed.
You will have done. Yeah.
We tried a different type of sparge for the first time, and again we ended up with with too little. And then the one yesterday, we matched a recipe to Gamma Ray, the Beavertown APA. And for anybody out there that does any home brewing, we've got this book. It's written by Brewdog, and inside there's a bunch of different recipes that you can go on. So we've been using this as a guide, I guess, and we followed the recipe. We ended up with an extra bit of pale ale malt in there rather than some darker malts. It was only 200 grams. We didn't think it would be much, but anyway, we managed to, I think, extract every single last gram of sugar in there, and it's fermenting away very happily at the moment, and we think it's going to be about 7.5%.
Good. So what was your starting gravity?
The
60s, 70s.
Yeah, no, it was before the sparge, it was up into the 80s.
Yeah, it will have been. Yeah, it will have been.
And then for the start of the fermentation, 1054. We've
Too bad.
Yeah, but I mean, we were aiming for 5%, not 7.5%. So
54. It depends what yeast you're using. Because
we've got
54. If 54 brings it down to under 1.01, I think you'll be looking at about you'll be probably closer to 6.5 maybe.
Okay.
I think if you got up to 7, I'd be very surprised with a starting gravity of 54.
Right. Okay.
But you'll have to tell me. You could prove me wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we've called this one the Vaccine Pale Ale.
Yeah, that's a good name. I like it. But it'll definitely, if it is 7.5%, it'll kill anything off that's in it.
I reckon. We just hope it's drinkable. I see that, Gav. We could have added a wee bit more water. We were chatting afterwards, and it was too late by that point. But we worked out we could have chucked a bit more water in.
It's never too late. You could always add some water later on after fermentation, as long as it comes out of a bottle. That's what I mean. You can always water it down a bit. I mean, not ridiculously, but if you wanted to take a little bit of, try and dilute it a little bit, you could drop 0.5%, maybe a bit more with some water. Just add some bottled water that that's sterile when it's finished fermenting. I mean, I've done it before. I hope HMRC aren't listening, but I've done it before with beer at the pub, where if something's, I mean, the couple of times where maybe something's been about 1% over, what I've done is I've just added water into each cask and then put the beer in, and it dilutes itself down. So I mean, there's no harm in doing that, really. Yeah. For a small volume like you're doing, it won't hurt at all.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, what we actually did with we did 10 litres yesterday. We've split it down into 2 separate fermenters, so it means we can dry hops slightly differently with the two, or we might even do a fruit.
Do it so you can then sort of. It's a good way of experimenting, isn't it? Doing it like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. You can sort of see which hops you like best, etc., etc.
Yeah. And obviously, we have a bit of time at this end at the moment, because there's
definitely it's the perfect time to be doing it.
Yeah. So and then this is the last one that we made. It was based on a pale ale recipe. You there, Tris? I'm
here.
Yeah. It was meant to sort of be about just under 4%, and we think it's sort of about 3.5, 3.3, something like that.
That's not too bad.
We're surprised how bitter it was. It was very. I mean, we tried to replicate the Punk IPA the first time round, and we were happy with that, and we got plenty of bitterness. But the hops that went into this one that we did were way lower, maybe like a tenth of the amount of hops that went into the IPA. But this has come out really bitter.
Was it the same variety of hops, or was it a different variety?
It was pretty similar, to be honest.
It could have been like the year that they were harvested, because hops, if they're fresh, they're a lot more potent than if they're a couple of years old.
Okay.
Looks like that. And then if you're using pellet or leaf.
Well, that's a good point, because what happened with this, we had a couple that we dry hop differently. They were both had a combination in during the boil of pellet and leaf, and then when we dry hopped, one batch had some pellets in and the others didn't. And the one with the pellets have made the beer much cloudier, that we haven't, even through conditioning for 3 weeks,
Yeah,
really cold temperatures, we haven't managed to clear.
hot pellets can cause a bit of an issue when it comes to that. I mean, you see, I mean, I've seen in cask beer when I've used hot pellets as a dry hop, when you put it into cask, it completely makes it go mental. Like there's obviously, I don't know why, but there's some reaction that hot pellets must have when you start to condition it, or what have you. It depends. It depends really.
What do you use typically, like the leaf ones or the pellets?
I prefer. It depends what I'm making, to be honest. For stuff that's, when I make my lager, for some weird reason, I only like using leaf. But then for everything else, I use pellet. But for something like a lager, you're not really going crazy on hops anyway. So leaf's always a little less harsh, let's say. Whereas pellets, pellets are you get about 20% more out of a pellet than you do out of a leaf.
Okay, oh, really?
So I like using pellets because you basically end up using less. You use less volume, and also cleaning leaf, because you will have experienced how much leaf like triples, quadruples in size once it's absorbed a load of liquid. Cleaning out of a big fermenter is not much fun. So whereas cleaning hot pellets out, it's just a load of slush at the bottom that you can rinse out, basically. But I think for actual results, I prefer pellets for anything that involves any more character, or for dry hopping, etc. I prefer pellets. But what I prefer to do is on a smaller, because in smaller containers, etc. Especially if you're brewing only 10 litres or 5 litres, put the pellets, you try and keep the pellets in a muslin bag or something. So you've got the ability to take them out, so they're not sitting in the bottom, because hot pellets can take up quite a lot of volume at the bottom of your fermenter, and they can cause all sorts of issues when you're transferring. So if you've got bags that you can put the pellets in, you won't get such a good infusion rate, but at least you've got the ability to take them out easily, and they're not going to cause any issues when you're transferring. And as Rockstar Longworth says, brew kits aren't clogged up as much when you use pellet, because they're only just a fine powder, basically. Whereas with leaf, I mean, if you get a leaf in a pump or something, it can stop a pump from working or what have you.
Yeah. Guys, is there any questions out there? If anybody has any questions about anything beer, just type away. The other frustration we've had as well, I mean, every time we're getting better, we're understanding more and more, is with the yeasts. Like, the yeasts just seem to be so temperamental. I mean, we've used the famous brands, and the last one that we had problems with, the one yesterday, worked absolutely perfect, but it was a liquid yeast, and you meant to smack the corner of the pack and it opens up the catalyst, and the thing just didn't swell at all.
Yeast are funny thing, because unfortunately it's the most important part of your brew day, really, at the end of it.
Yeah, really. And without it, you haven't got any beer.
And yeast can be so temperamental, because obviously it's a living organism. So I genuinely have, I have conspiracies about yeast, and I really think that they know more about what they're doing than people think, because they can read you. If you're in a rush or anything, yeast will do its best to take as long as it possibly can to want to do what you want it to do. Yeah. But it all depends on the style of yeast you're using. I mean, there are some yeasts. I mean, the yeast I use, I literally use for all my ales. I use one yeast nowadays. I don't bother mixing and changing. I use it's Safale Safale SO5. It's just a cracking yeast. It's got
a yellow packet.
There will be yellow packets, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
Sapphire. I
that
think
was
they're
the
from
one we used.
Holland.
Sorry?
I think they're from Holland, and they make all sorts. They make so I use Sapphire for nearly everything. Well, I do use Sapphire for everything. I use Sapphire K97 for the wheat beer I make. I use Sapphire S23 for the lager, and that's a Dortmund style yeast. I
Yeah.
use SO5 for all the ales. But if I'm making something like an American pale ale, I'll sometimes use US04 because that's a like a strain of yeast that is made specifically for American pale ales by Sapphire, and they're all fantastic yeasts. They have a great working range. You know, generally anything. I mean, like the SO5, you could have it. It will ferment at 12 degrees, or it will ferment at 30 degrees. And it will make no difference to the beer at all.
Yeah.
I mean, like SO5 it's so reliable as well. You never have any off flavors. It always ferments exactly like. I wish I'd got them with me. My laptop's at work, but I could show you the fermentation profiles, or like the graphs of the last 15 beers I made. You know, let's say I took the stout, I'd be able to pretty much, probably with maybe a day's variance, there would be pretty much the same day by day of the yeast fermenting the beer out over 15 beers. I mean, it is so reliable.
And
That,
is that
I mean,
a dry
it's a dry yeast, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
and
dry
you don't
yeast,
have to rehydrate it. Do you have to rehydrate that one?
No, so what I do is I reuse my yeast quite a lot because obviously I'm using the same yeast for everything. What I'll do is when a fermenter is emptied, I'll be filling that fermenter straight back up. So I will harvest the wet yeast out of the bottom of the tank, and then clean the tank out whilst I'm brewing. And then when the wort's in after the boil, that fresh yeast goes back in.
Right.
Because it's already hydrated. And that yeast is literally like you put it in, and if you gave it 2 hours, you'd see it fermenting. You know, it's really, really, really impressive. Whereas if I'm using a brand new pack, what I'll do is I'll take maybe 2 or 3 litres, put it in a big jug, add the yeast into the jug, mix it up, leave it for an hour, let it start, because it starts to ferment then. It just hydrates it a bit, and then I just throw it into the tank. But I mean, I know a lot of guys that use SO5, this Sapphire, and they don't even bother hydrating. They just put it dry straight into the fermenter.
Yeah, well, it was funny because the last time we had a problem, it was the is it the W yeast, the liquid yeast that we use?
Y Labs.
Yeah, that was the one, and it just didn't work. And luckily,
I'm surprised. I mean, the problem with wet, I think the problem with wet, yeast like that, where you've got a starter or a catalyst, what have you, they've got such a short like lifespan as well. They've only got ever so long in the packet before it starts to lose its efficiency.
Yeah.
I mean, I use dry yeast. On the other hand, I mean, it's pretty much good to go for quite a long time.
Well, that was the one I managed to get. I managed to get it in from Gran Canaria. They said it would take 4 days to get here. Luckily, it took 24 hours. And I put the wort in the fridge and then warmed it up as soon as the yeast arrived, chucked it in, and it was bubbling away in 12 hours. So it's
as Rockstar says, putting dry yeast straight into a tank isn't a problem. It works just as well. I think I just do it out of habit more than anything. I like to see it fermenting before I put it in the wort, but I think that's just personal preference, maybe.
Yeah.
Personal preference.
Cool. So.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there, guys? Either on Lanzarote beers or beers in general, or beers at the Black Swan. How many beers are you making typically?
Right. Probably I've got probably 5 or 6 that I keep on all the time.
Right.
Sometimes, depending on how busy I am and how much certain beers are going. I mean, the core beers, I make a stout, a pale ale, a bitter, and the lager. And between those, in tourist season, they're pretty much the only things I can make because it's literally like, especially with the pale ale. I mean, the pale ale and the lager tank gets emptied and gets filled straight back up again, pretty much the next day. And then ales, I'm making for every one. Let's say for every one porter I'm making 2 of the pale ale to try and keep up with demand. So during the tourist season or busy season, if I can make anything other than the core beers, I'm lucky, just because of capacity. But I try and make. We've got a really nice wheat beer that I make that I try and keep made as much as possible. I've not made it this last year because I just didn't have the capacity to do so. I've started making an American pale ale, which is just American. It's just American hops, Cascade and Simcoe. A bit of Cascade and Simcoe in the boil, and then a bit of Cascade and Simcoe flame out just to steep it, and then that's it. No dry hopping, nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Dan's asking, what's your go-to beer? What's your style?
My go-to beer. If I'm out and there's nothing I recognise, or there's nothing that really seems to be hitting me, I'll go for something dark nowadays. I used to hate stouts and porters and anything, but I've really come on to porters and stouts. I've fallen in love with a beer from Titanic Brewery. I think it's a plum porter from Titanic. That's very nice. I'd probably go for, if I was at the supermarket, I'd probably get something like Brewdog's always a good go-to beer.
Yeah.
Not that I think their beers are as good as they used to be since they've gone mainstream. But I really do like Goose Island IPA as like a more mainstream beer nowadays. Goose Island's really, really nice, and I've been drinking. I've liked that for many years.
Yeah.
But I would say that my overall favourite beer is, and it's going to sound really cliche because it's typical, but Pliny the Elder. I mean, like if you can ever get a bottle of that, whatever they are, I think it's $40 for 2 bottles nowadays.
Oh, really?
That's a really good beer.
Wow.
Yeah, you should Google Pliny the Elder. They're very clever. They keep it brewed once or twice a year, limited stock, pre-ordered. It's sold out before it's even brewed. And there's such a cult following of it that people will buy it just to say they've bought a bottle of the 2019 range. And I don't think hardly ever any of it gets drunk nowadays. I think most people just buy it to collect it.
Put it on the shelf.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. What other beers am I on at the moment? Must admit, if I'm like going for bottled beers, I really like Krombacher from Germany. You know, that's quite a nice pilsner. I might even have some in the fridge actually. Let me have a look. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay. So, does anybody else have any questions about brewing, beers?
Here you go. Krombacher.
Okay.
That's nice beer. It's from somewhere in Germany. That's if you're going for like a more not craft beer, but you want something that's well made on quite a high level, then Krombacher is always nice. Most German pilsners are nice though.
Yeah.
If you want anything like that, German beer is the way to go. Or Czech.
Yeah. I must say, I like the Pilsner Quell.
Yeah, that's good.
We can get that over here. We're quite limited on the island. I
was going to say, what's beer choice like on the island? Has it got better?
It's 100%. It's better than it was even 2 or 3 years ago, but it's still got a long way to go. I mean, typically 95% of the bars have just got a couple of lagers on, one slightly better than the other two. But in terms of craft and different styles, very, very limited. It is getting better. So hopefully in time we will have more selection. But the craft side of things is certainly from the island here. Some of the bars, a handful literally. You can get sort of Punk IPA, Elvis Juice, but you've really got to know where to go to get them. And aside from that, there's just no other selection here. So there's a good following. The guys that are producing have no problem selling their production. It is very good, but we don't have like a big external sort of selection of beers here.
So the beers that are brewed locally, do those guys have their own tap houses, or can you buy it? Can you get it in other bars and what have you? Have they got dedicated lines, or is it all bottled, or is it? How are they getting rid of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, one of them is purely pretty much like yourself, selling through their restaurants and bar, although they have recently opened up a tap room. It's called Los Aljibes de Tahiche in Costa Geese, in a little square there. And they were the guys that started first of all. Hopefully in time they'll have more reach as well. There's another brewery here called Cerveza Now, and they would, I would say, be more commercialized out of the three, with the distribution points in the other Canaries. And then there is another brewery called Malpais in the countryside here, and they have a brew pub on site which is open 5 or 6 days a week. And then they are selling in bottles typically to some of the restaurant and sort of more crafty artisan type bars and restaurants here. So I would say it's still, it's pretty in its infancy here. There's still a lot of scope, It's good. It's good though if it's becoming more of a thing that people are used to, then it will quickly take off. I mean, when my dad had the brewery in Turkey, at the time we were the fourth licensed brewery in the country. Like we were one of the first properly registered proper microbreweries. There were a couple that had attempted and had a go at it, but hadn't really taken off. But I'd say that we were probably the first to properly take off as a microbrewery, and it was the same there. I mean, we opened there in 2012, and we had a good 3 years brewing there before my dad, they left back to the UK. And I went back to Turkey in 2017, end of 2017, and I couldn't believe in Istanbul, because that's where we were, how many more breweries had popped up and how many craft beer had suddenly become a thing. Like it's suddenly taken off. Like between 2013 and 2017, it had gone from being able to get, if you were lucky, Guinness on draft in an Irish pub, and maybe a couple of bottles of London Pride in a shifty little shop somewhere that happened to have it, to 4 years later, I think there were 5 or 6 proper breweries, microbreweries in the city. There were bars that were opening specifically for craft beer, that they were only opening to either do craft beer or cocktails. There was no mainstream beer, and that it started to pick up quite quickly. I mean, I think there's now, when you go down south in Turkey, there's 5 or 6 breweries, dotted around the coastline. It's becoming more, it's picked up, because for a long time it was either FS, Carlsberg, or Tuborg. They were the 3 main breweries in the country. Yeah. And past that, there was no one. And they had such a demand and such a hold on the market. But I think all it took was people to start tasting new beers, and for people like Brewdog and what have you, who tried to get in, and Guinness, who managed to get in. As soon as Guinness came into the country, I think it changed a lot of the Turks' perception of what beer was, because they'd only ever drunk FS or Carlsberg, which was a light beer. Yeah. And FS tried to bring out a dark beer, but it was basically a light. I'm back. Here we go. think we got Tristan here. We overstayed our welcome. Hey, here we're back. I think we overstayed our welcome on Instagram and they kicked us off.
Kicked us off.
Yeah, we've been talking too much.
Now, probably every hour they're kicking us off, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really interesting to see. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I went back and saw how much more craft beer there was. So I think if you've already got 3 breweries on the island, I'm sure it'll just exponentially grow.
Yeah. No, it sounds a very similar story, and we see it here. You know, so many people now experimenting and trying. You know, not just in beers as well. I mean, it can be local cheeses, local wines, local produce. You know, I think there's there's very much a trend towards things that have been, produced with love and care and a story behind them as well. So that all continues, and I'm sure it will after all of this is out of the way. There'll be support for local produce.
I hope so. I mean, I'm only talking off a little bit of experience I get just looking, because I'm still going in to do brewing and what have you. So I see what's going on down the high street here, even here in Pickering. We're on lockdown, but it seems like the local places, the butchers, the grocers, the pet shop, even us, as a pub, we've still got a lot of locals still using us and still buying from us. So I'm hoping that we might see a bit of a revival of people using more, local shops instead of just relying on buying stuff online or going to the big shops to get stuff. They might start seeing, I was chatting with my gran and quite a few people around here use the local milkman again now.
Right.
And he's inundated with people using him because, I think a lot of people have realised at the moment the most reliable thing to do is to try and get stuff from as close to home as possible.
And get it, dropped on the doorstep, and
exactly.
It stops everybody around, yeah. And if you can drink a good beer at the same time, then it makes all the more sense.
You're winning. You're winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Well.
So how many beers have you brewed then? 5.
Yeah, 5. So we kicked off with with an IPA, a 5 litre. It was you bought it in a tub, and everything was in there, and it was just very, very simple. It came out fine. It didn't taste great, if I'm honest with you. It was drinkable, but it wasn't very good. And then after that, we bought a 10 litre pot for the stove from Lidl, and we very soon worked out that to do slightly more beer was going to take much bigger equipment, and we did one batch. No, in fact, I'm getting confused. No, we went straight we used that to do the 5 litre batch. And then when we went up to do a 20 litre batch, so we needed to buy a big old pot from one of the restaurant, the hostelerias in the capital here. And we've just been doing 20 litres since then. And we did the Punk IPA. We did the next one we did was the I've forgotten the name. Not the 5 AM Saints. It was the Dead Pony Club, the Pale Ale, 3.8%. And we have done a lager for the first time. That's currently in the fridge at the moment. We're giving that six weeks. And then
well, the choice of
a question for you, actually. We're going to leave that 6 weeks to condition. And then once we've conditioned it, when we go on to bottling it, we're going to have to add in our sugar into the bottle to get the secondary fermentation. Yeah. When we do that, we're going to have to leave that at, say, 18 to 20 degrees. Or the yeast is.
Yeah, I'd put it somewhere a bit cooler than that.
Right.
14 degrees, 14 to 16, 12 to 16, something like that.
Okay.
And let it
not
at condition. Because your lager yeast will have fermented at a lower temperature, won't it? It will have needed it.
I mean, what I did with that, I left it in room temperature to get going for I don't know, best part of 24 hours, I'd say. Yeah. And once the bubbling had started, I then put it in the fridge to finish off the fermentation.
Have you got like a temperature control fridge so you can control it?
No. I basically
the best piece of advice Oh dear. The best piece of advice I can give you is to try and create, even if it's a really budget, like really, budget way of doing it.
Yeah.
Try and get some form of temperature control in place, be it in a, with a fridge with just a thermometer shoved through the door, so you can and onto just a really basic thermostat or something, so it can control the temperature a bit. Because when it comes to brewing and consistency in brewing, it's all about temperature control, really.
Yeah.
And you get your consistency from that. So switching a fridge on and off again, it'll give you results, but you won't get the same results from
get the best results. Well, funnily enough, when we needed the temperature thermometer, it was just when it was our first lager. It was just when the lockdowns kicked off here, so we didn't have time to get everything together. So it's on the wish list now.
On the wish list.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Temperature control is important.
One piece of kit, I'll show you this, that we did make just in time before the lockdown.
Oh, is that to cool the beer down? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
It works amazingly well. I mean, the water that runs through it's about 18 degrees, and it keeps our work down in less than an hour. Whereas without
they're revolutionary.
It was
having anything
8 hours before. So
it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
Just you wait till you get yourself a heat exchanger, and then you'll be chilling it in a matter of 20 minutes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, this is probably the only one in the world that works like this, okay? Because it doesn't actually use any water. So the water here comes in from the tank that I've got outside, the aljibe that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So it goes in here through a garden hose pipe, through the coil, and then it goes out through another hose pipe back into the tank where it started. So it uses electricity, but it just doesn't use any water.
Well, I think most. I mean, when I'm doing my chill, when I'm transferring from kettle to fermenter, my beer goes through a heat exchanger, and the cold water that's used to come in it comes through cold, through the heat exchanger, out hot, and then it goes up to my hot liquor tanks. Then I use the water that I brew with the next time.
Yeah,
is the water that was used on the last brew to cool the beer down.
Okay, I'm pretty sure
the only time that water. I think it's very rare that any water has to be used that hasn't already been used already.
Yeah.
In the process.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how Gavin does it as well over here.
Yeah, it's the best way because it's the most cost effective and it's the most environmentally, efficient. Yeah. And you're being a bit, you're sort of just using everything as much as you can, trying to keep as much energy saved as possible.
Yeah. Because I mean, you use a lot of water in brewing typically. I mean,
what's it? 5? I think this week's 5 for every 1 litre of beer. It takes about 5 litres of water. I think they say.
Yeah.
In the complete
process
and everything. Yeah.
But just through the brew itself, you end up losing about 30% of water, don't you, to evaporation and to.
Yeah.
All of that.
So you mash. If let's say my mash I use about 2. So I make 360 litres of water, and I need 560 litres overall to make that 360.
Yeah.
But with mash and the sparge, and then then there's the water involved to cool the beer down, which is that's 500 litres. So you're looking at 1,000 litres of water to make 360 litres of water, really.
Yeah.
So it's quite incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible how much is used.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So I haven't seen any questions come up. I don't think.
No.
Yeah, you did. You didn't say you enjoyed it at the time. Well, certainly Aidan didn't say he enjoyed our homebrew. It's because he didn't drink it cold enough. Okay, so I think we'll probably wrap it up here if there's no more.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm always happy to come on again if you've ever got any more questions about yeah, Rockstar, he's got the idea.
Yeah, he does exactly the same as what you do.
Yeah,
He doesn't
yeah.
lose
That
it.
is the most energy and cost efficient way of doing things.
Yeah. And one more question, actually, Tristan. You know, just in terms of, I mean, the brew that we did yesterday, we kicked off with just over 2 kilograms of malt, and we started the mash, or we did the mash with 7 liters of water.
Yeah.
What sort of ratio would you recommend?
Well, now you're asking me. Hang on a minute. Let me do some quick mental maths. So my mash volume is, I use generally about 100 kilos of malt. Let's say 95. Yeah, let's do 100 kilos of malt. About 3 to 1.
About 3 to
2.6 or something. Maybe it might be 0.6 to 1.
Okay. And then
6 litres of water to every kilo of malt or something.
And then
Maybe a bit more.
Complicating it further then. So that's similar to what we're doing. When you come to sparge, we sparged yesterday with 5. We ended up with 6 liters. So we mashed with 7 and sparged with 6.
Sounds about right. Yeah, it all depends really on your volume of mash per ton, because I do the opposite. I mash with less and sparge with more.
Right.
But if you mash with less and sparge with more, do the other way around: mash with more, sparge with less.
Yeah.
As long as you're getting the same end volume, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
It just depends, because my mash tun is short but wide, so I can only fit so much in it. The volume of mash tun isn't great. It's probably not big enough really. But I can just about make a 5% beer in it, and it will fill it pretty much to the brim. Right. So then I have to overcompensate with sparge water, because I could do with really. It would be better really the other way around, but it swings and roundabouts really. As long as you're getting the same end volume and also the same end numbers, then just do it however you want.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, but I mean, certainly sparging, what we've worked out is that you know, we had seen things where you could get by it by putting more water in and shaking the bag and giving it an extra stir, but really to get the water flowing through the grain, it's so efficient in terms of sort of, you know, extracting all those sugars.
Oh man, sparging's the only way you should be doing it. When you initially told me that you were doing it you're mashing in a big bag and pulling the bag out.
Yeah.
I thought he's going to at some point come up with issues with not sparging. And then about 10 seconds later he said, and then we realised we needed to sparge. Because the problem with the malt and the grain is that it really does keep so much sugar. It's literally like its own filter bed. And if you don't wash it out properly, you're never going to get all that sugar, all that fermentable sugar. You're never going to get it out. No. Sparging is so important.
Shall I tell you how we made the false bottom to our sparger?
Yeah, go on.
Well, again, it was in desperate times of need when all the shops are shut. But I had for the microwave somewhere I don't know, you could grill on this little metal bed.
Oh yeah, that's not a bad idea.
So cut the legs off it, and then on top of it, got an IKEA tray, and cut around the tray, and then drilled some holes in it. It's not exactly circular, but it seems to work.
What we used to do was we did pretty much exactly the same thing. I think we found this is when Dad was homebrewing. I'm sure he had a cake, like you said, like a cake tray thing, where, you know, when you cooked a cake and you can stand it on, it's slotted. And what we did was we chopped the legs down a bit, so it only sat, ever so far off the bottom of the mash tun.
Yeah.
And then all we used to do was wrap it in a muslin bag So then the muslin bag acted as the filter.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's all we used to do. I'm sure. I can't remember, but I'm sure it was a long time ago. But I'm sure that's what we used to do.
Yeah. No, it's been great just having to think about these things and gradually like
You've got to
improvising
become,
and improving.
you've got to become more Heath Robinson with everything. Yeah, you've got to sort of just come up on the fly what you want to do. Yeah, you've got to just make things out of what you've got. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Good stuff.
So cool. Cheers for the comments, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone for turning up. And if you ever want me back on, more than happy to.
Cool. Well, no, it's been great, eh? It's like great to hear, things have been going well for you, and in the future we can have an update when we're
fingers crossed. Yeah, well, keep safe and keep brewing.
Yeah, same to you. Good luck with everything, eh?
Yeah, you too. All right, take care. See you all.
Cheers, Tristan. Take care.
See you then.
See you, mate.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Good luck. So, cheers for joining us, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. It was slightly different. I certainly enjoyed it. It was great to be able to pick Tristan's brains about everything beer. So, I'll try and do something for next Saturday. If anyone's got any ideas, then please let me know. It does help. And in the meantime, everybody take care, stay well, and see you soon. All the best. Cheers.